The other day I coded up this strategy with the help of Claude and VS and Python. Basically, it wasn't really a strategy, but what it was an insight into how different days would react after certain things happened prior to it. Maybe the day before there was an up day, or the day before was a down day, and how that would affect the session or the full day going forward. So I found that quite fascinating because I discovered that there were some high probability trends that would put me maybe on the right side of the trend. And later I ended up going as far as splitting it up into seeing what happens if there was perhaps 2 days in a row doing something like down days or so forth. Let's have a look how I could use this to my advantage in trading. So I'm asking Claude some questions. I wanted to first eliminate the header names because I found it to be very disruptive in the way that I put the price data in, and having this removed on the top line there, the time, open, high, low, close, volume line, I just found it completely unnecessary. And by the way, if you're not sure what I'm using right now, this program is called Visual Studio, and it's communicating with my Python on my PC. I go into depth on how I learned to use it right here in this video, so feel free to check that out. Let's continue. When I put that through, it didn't really quite work out right away, and so I went to consult with Claude to see if we could get this going. I'm just removing that first line. I don't really care about the headers. I don't think the robot or whatever, the machine needs this. So I'm like, let's get this out of the way in case I get some extra data and I plant it in there. Usually when you download data from MetaTrader, you don't really have that first layer or that first row. So it's completely unnecessary. There is the error. I copied and pasted it, gave it to Claude. It seems like we have a corrected version of the code. Then I wanted Claude to give me the code with everything in it. Asking Claude just to, yep, please give me the code in its entirety. Looks like there was some changes made, so I decided just to go ahead and put the new code in, save it, run it, compare it. Looks like it's the same thing, but upon closer inspection, I noticed that in fact it does work. Organizing everything neatly. I find working with Claude Sonnet on code-based things very easily manageable. I really like doing it. So I opened up a new chat because now that I had a baseline, I don't need to stretch out Claude in its previous chat. Starting a new chat will actually take less bandwidth, and I'll get more use out of Claude in a shorter amount of time. So this is where the process begins of turning the code that looks only 1 day before to actually look at a pattern of previous 2 days and the day of the week together. So I start organizing, I run the code, and it looks like, yep, I'm getting some interesting data now with what happens on certain days of the week after a certain trend of days in the previous 2 days. And I wanted to check if it's using the 1630 mark at the beginning of the market open. Is using the close of that candle as the marker, or is it using anything else? And Claude decided to go ahead and edit the code. I asked Claude not to really do that anymore, but whatever, it's okay. Just wanted to know how it's stamped. Yeah, I told Claude that this broker basically uses a certain time and he doesn't need to worry about the fact that a market usually starts at 9:30. Send a new instruction all in one piece. Very simple on just the data that I input to Claude right now. I'm also asking Claude to tell me how it's calculating the previous 2 days. And by throwing these prompts back at Claude, I get to train it. Now I can make edits and create new PY files to stay organized in my journey so that I don't get mixed up, and later when I'm pulling anything, I can just really quickly find stuff. So now I called it open and close. It seems like there's quite a bit of a difference between the open and close of the candle, but that's okay because getting 2 different perspectives is better. On a text file, and then I can compare it. I saved all the screenshots with the charts that VS produced, because it's going to be very helpful for me to understand later. And I also applied the names accordingly. That way I can fish them out anytime I want. Just rename everything, keep it organized. Now I can put them side by side. I got the 2 full day pattern analysis starting at 16:30 of the close of the candle on the left, and right beside it I have the open of the candle. Trying to find some probabilities, see how different it is. I'm not looking for any major differences, but I am looking to see if there are any. And there are a few, but they're not too big. The good part is that having basically 2 sides of the coin kind of to that particular market open gives me a better perspective. Usually that first candle of the market open is quite large, very lot of volume in that candle, and it moves in one certain direction. So it's always better to see, you know, whether better to take it right away or wait for it to close. And so now I'm just checking the charts here for the most recent move. Down day, so 2 days in a row going down. And I can just check, well, what happens on the next day if it's down, or actually it was a down up day. Now I wanted to see if I can identify these trends near market tops, but I was just having trouble to figure out which day was where and which day was up and down and things like that. So I got an idea. Hey, why don't we just make an MT4 indicator that can display that on the chart? And the super cool part is that Claude just immediately produced an indicator that I could use for that purpose. So I ended up just opening the MQL language editor. But when I put it on the chart, it didn't really do anything yet. So it's time to go back to Claude and see if we can figure this out. And I know that we can. It's just, you got to be a little bit more stubborn and just keep going. Looking at the journal, I'm trying to figure out whether there's something missing, whether there's some tell sign of what's holding it back, but I can't figure it out. So I'm asked Claude to look into it again. Started another indicator. Now I'm just going to use the same exact name. That way there's no misunderstanding. Now I'm actually getting arrows somewhere, just random arrows. It's a simple code, so that's good to see. I'm trying to figure out whether, you know, why this one isn't showing, so I'm checking different time frames, opening up a new chart just to make sure everything's nice and clean. Sometimes the chart, it could be, I don't know, have a little bit of corruption on it, so sometimes using a new chart is always good, you know, try. It's just another variable. So the idea is that I want for every, oh, there we go. The idea is that I want to see down and down up days very easily, cleanly on the chart, and we've seemed to be successful in that regard just now. So now I'm trying to figure out, well, how can I use this? Well, actually, I could use this pretty clearly, very easily. I can see which ones are up days, which ones are down days, but I wanted to make sure that these arrows, they're the right color and they're very easy to identify. And it looks like the colors are actually not identifying with what I had on the graph. So I wanted to make sure everything's looking pretty good on the graph. I don't want the graph to be showing different colors than the actual MT4 chart. So we're going to be changing up the colors. Plug the code in, see if it changed the colors. Some of the arrows are pointing up and some of them are pointing down, which I thought was kind of weird. Looks like Claude got stuck here. Probably got busy helping someone else. And here's where my intention is to actually read a CSV file or figure out how it would be easy just to plot on the chart the probabilities of today's trade. But I had a strong suspicion that doing that on MT4 would be very resource intensive and it might actually crash it. So perhaps there's like a different way. It turns out that the pre-calculated approach marked with number 2 is a better option because it will be way less heavy, because all that MT4 will have to read is only reading what's in the indicator pulled from from the probabilities of that CSV file. Or I should say from the probabilities that we produced with the code in Python based on the CSV file, which is actually really helpful because I can throw in the 1630 open and I can throw in the 1630 close results. Here I just want to compare stuff, the open and close of the candle once again. Really I'm focused on Thursday. Some errors, but It's okay, I'm not smart enough to look at it, but the good thing is Claude is. Claude can just handle it. I'm actually getting some interesting data here. It's displayed a little bit differently, but that's quite all right. But I just wanted to make sure that it's reading it properly. And at this point, I realized that some of the data is actually reversed, like the up, down, up data is not showing properly. So I figured out that it generates statistics, but they don't match. So now I wanted to figure out how it's reading this data. And it looks like Claude just wasn't really reading exactly how the original code operated, because once these chats get a little bit too long, then Claude doesn't really hop over to every single part of the chat. That's why it's really important and beneficial to keep the chats shorter if possible. And I think the down up and the up down have their stats switched, but that's okay because that's a real easy way. This is a really easy thing for Claude to figure out and switch. Comparing all the stats, making sure everything's looking good. I wanted to check at least 3 or 4 days, but I ended up checking all 5. Wanted to make sure that everything is looking exactly as it was with the original Python code, so that when I'm putting it on the chart, I'm actually getting the same statistics, because what's the point of reading it a different way and not comparing it if that's not exactly the way that I intended to do it. Now it's time to copy the code and put it back into MQL, but now I'm not actually seeing it, so I have to copy the data that I got from the statistics that I got from the previous code. Now they're not showing up, but it's cool because I could copy these errors and give them back to Claude. I let Claude know I copied the probabilities from the Python code. Here's what they look like, but upon entering it, it actually doesn't work. Here are the error codes. Boom, all in one line. Just pasted it. Boom, got the result, got the new indicator back. Copied the new indicator back into MQL, compile, but now I'm getting an error, so I tried pasting it into Claude. I don't think you can control C from MT4, but I realized you actually have to right click and select copy and paste the error here. So now Claude can get the actual error. Gave me only partial code, but it looks pretty easy to install. So I went ahead, I copied that and I placed it where it needed to be. Compile. Actually, there was a few portions of the code kind of stuck, and it's kind of a little confusing for me. So I let Claude know that I kind of prefer just to have the whole thing back, because there's so many different portions of it. Plus there's the txt file that didn't convert and fit before, so I was kind of worried it wouldn't work. So here's the modification of the MQL4 file. I'm actually getting probabilities on the chart, which is really exciting. So I can see the probabilities of the 30 minutes ending up higher. I can compare that to my statistics. Now this code actually does show the numbers on there, which is great. Putting it back on there. Now it's time to do some minor cosmetics here and figure out if we can make it look a little bit better and it can be an actual indicator I could see and I can use. And this is kind of hard because right now it's just kind of portions of the code and just changing it up. You don't really need to understand the code, but you do need to know where it starts and where it ends when you're doing this process. But now I am able to do it on the current candle, which is actually where you want the probabilities to tell you what the probabilities are. So that's where you want the statistics to be, which is exciting. Now the full day probability ending up on the chart would also be very good, because then I could see what are the probabilities of the 30-minute beginning of the market session going up, and also what are the probabilities of that day actually functioning in the same way. But a lot of times it doesn't work out very well because Claude will just dump them on top of each other, because the way machines read stuff, it's not like humans read it. We actually need it, in lines, but Claude can read text all dumped on top of each other. So unfortunately I'm not a machine and I can't do that, but let's just try a different approach to show and display the statistics on the chart. So now it's a little bit better because I can see it. Side by side is actually the best that I could find, because going forward trying to do this process, trying to rearrange it on the right side of the candle, it didn't really work, so I abandoned that part of my quest. I could just have this chart stretched out and I could read it a little better, that's fine. Okay, and I thought that was pretty successful, but I don't want to type that in because then Claude will respond and will like kill my bandwidth. Now it's time to make the candles look, or sorry, the arrows look a little bit better, because I can't remember which colors are which all the time. So it would be great if we could have the candles display the direction of the candles display their actual previous 2 days. But this was a big runaround, so I'm just gonna skip through all of this. Just know that this took a while, and eventually I had to end up handling it the next day. But yeah, it worked out really great. Turns out that the probabilities wise, next day was actually, there was a 0% chance that the probability of that day be higher than the previous day. And it doesn't really happen very often. Mind you, it is on a very small sample size of only 5, but it actually made me start thinking that since we're kind of top of the day already, or near the top of the previous day, if we have a 0% chance probability that the day will end up higher, then I should start to think about whether I'm good to short from here. Again, it is just from a shorter sample size, only 5 days in the last March really had this particular scenario, so it's kind of sample size that I wasn't really too comfortable with, so I wasn't really willing to bet a lot, but wanted to see if it's reasonable to do so. Mind you that the 30 minutes really was showing 60% up 30 minutes based on the previous 2 days data and the day that the trading day is on. 60% is almost like a coin toss, and I ended up only taking the full day, not the 30-minute one. So you can watch that in my next video. Cheers.